Your faces look very good. Welcome tonight to April at Sanctuary Online. Welcome everybody. Tonight is, interestingly enough, April 6th, and yet it is our March book club. And I'm going to explain that in just a minute. And yet I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, open us up, and remind everybody that we'd love it if you were to enable your video and keep your gorgeous faces online tonight. Ensure that you're in gallery view, because I'm sure tonight, as all of our book conversations are, it will be a rousing conversation with fighting to get in and make comments on this amazing book. And if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and open your chat box. You can type in there your first and last name, your email address, maybe where you're calling in from, and how you got connected to us at Sanctuary Online. Also, if we don't have your cell phone number yet, it's a gorgeous little trick that we have. If you pop your cell phone number, we make sure we have it in our database, and Barb sends out a cute little reminder it's Tuesday, text you every Tuesday afternoon. And so that's our welcome tonight. I'm excited to greet everyone. And as I said, tonight is actually our March book conversation. Now, most of you who've been following along with Sanctuary Online know that our book conversations tend to happen on the last Tuesday of the month. Well, last month was, how do I say, quite full. We had a Taste of Self, which was a pilot for the larger curriculum, Creating a Life That Matters. That was a 4-part series that we were just over the moon with the responses we got on those 4 sessions. And then we had our Seder dinner. Actually, Sanctuary Online began a year ago on May 5th, after we tested out the concept of doing programming online. And we did our first Seder dinner last year online. This year, we did the same thing. We had a South group with a gorgeous table all set down at Sanctuary South in Austin, Texas. And Cheryl put a gorgeous spread and a gorgeous table up here, Sanctuary North in Northern Michigan. And we welcomed everybody and had a wonderful story and meal. And so that had to happen last week. So it bumped our March book conversation, which is tonight, Care of the Soul, into April 6th. And I'll share this later tonight, but we have some exciting programming and kind of a lighter programming in April because March was so heavy. But we're going to go to Egypt, and a little bit later, Barb's going to tell us a little bit about that. And then April 20th, it's a new Sanctuary Online feature called Meet the Artist. And we actually have that artist in-house tonight for our book conversation. So Edie, I'm going to have you and Cheryl chat about that a little bit. And then we're actually going to have a book conversation in April, for April, The Book of Longings by Sue Monk Kidd. So my friends, tonight I welcome you to, not this one, not this one, not this one, or this one, or this one. We read a lot, don't we?
I was going to say, dang, we read a lot of books.
And not this one, but this one. So Care of the Soul by Thomas More. Not the easiest book to get through, which I'm sure you'll share that in your conversation tonight. And the reason we chose it, it was kind of a test, like all of March was. Care of the Soul is a source book. Many of the quotes, or a number of the quotes from Creating a Life That Matters, come out of this great work. And so we thought it might be interesting to actually delve a little deeper and kind of continue that theme of the work we did together in Creating a Life That Matters last month. So Cheryl, they are all yours. God bless you.
Right. Well, I'm just going to start with my impression of the book and then let you all jump in. Because, because I'm the leader, so I get to go first, right? So for me, this was a challenging read, especially at first. And the reasons being that, my vocabulary is not nearly as expanded as his. And so I had a problem with that. And then my unfamiliarity with Greek mythology also threw me off because he made a lot of comparisons without really explaining what he was comparing it with. And I just couldn't get my head around his definition of care of the soul. I mean, it was like, I'm one of these people that likes to have it in a spreadsheet or categories or in a box or something. And it just wasn't that clean. It was messy, So I had a hard time with it at first. And that's why I checked in with you all and said, so how's it going with you? And you guys seemed okay with it. So I said, okay, I guess I'll persist. And, it got easier as we got on with it. And I really kind of enjoyed the second half a lot better than the first half. And that was when I finally got a relatively decent grasp of the ideas after they were repeated enough to me that I got it. So now, what do you guys have to say about it? What was your experience?
Okay, well, I'll go first.
Okay.
I'm with you, Cheryl. Your first half was really heavy slugging for me as well, for all the same reasons. And my evaluation, now that I'm at a 92% finished the book, all I have to say is that having read the first half 3 times,
oh my goodness.
Well, I'd read a paragraph and then I'd think, I haven't got a clue what the hell I just read.
Yeah.
So then I'd go back and I'd read it again. And then I'd pick out snippets and then I'd say, I still don't understand it. So I'll keep going and maybe there will be light at the end of the tunnel or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was difficult slugging. But the second half, what I found was, I'm reading on a tablet. What I found was I had a Word document open on my tablet as well. And I was amazed how often there were these little snippets that I didn't want to let go of. So I did a quick copy and paste over onto my blank sheet behind the story. And so all I have to say is that thank you for the idea. I'm glad I persisted. It certainly was worth it as we got into the more lay terms in terms of the descriptions and the definitions and so on. But at the end of the evening, what I'd really like is if somebody could please describe for me, what is my soul?
There you go.
Because I don't know yet. So anyway,
And
next.
it's like, that's why I showed up. Okay, now
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Edie, go for it.
Yeah, I'll tackle it. So I'm just kind of at a good place for what is in this book right now. Because I've been for years struggling with all kinds of stuff. I mean, getting fired from a job, a breakup of a relationship, getting started in something new, which I love, which is art, which new meaning I've now been working on metalwork for 5 years. And right now I'm going through a huge legal issue in Colorado. I'm the good guy. I'm having issues with the bad guy next door, which has basically meant I haven't slept without pharmacological help since July, basically. But so what I liked was, I think in CLM we talked about the fact that we're not a body with a spirit. We're a spirit inhabiting this body right now.
Yeah.
And so when I think about what Moore was saying in the care of the soul, is that we in our body, given our experience of the world, may not be giving freedom to this spirit that's inhabiting our body right now. And so, for example, I have all kinds of things. Glenda, I did it the old-fashioned way. I'm marked in the margins. But so, for example, when he says soul appears most easily in those places where we feel most inferior. And when we're going through our trials and tribulations, we feel, oh, my soul is sick. I feel like crap. I think this book writ large lets me think about these dark places. And actually the mythology helped me a little bit, because we think about the soul either going to heaven or hell, like that's the end game, right? I frankly don't believe in Satan, and I don't believe in hell, even though I'm a preacher's kid and a 4th generation there's 4 generations of ministers in my family. So that whole journey of Persephone and down into the underworld, for some reason, even though I had studied, the stories and the Odysseus going into the underworld, or Beowulf battling, the battle with Beowulf, and for some reason, this analogy at this time in my life made me feel like it gave me a little bit more reassurance about those trials and tribulations being opportunities for growth for the soul, rather than just human trials and tribulations that you just got to suck it up and move on. Now that doesn't mean it's easy, but I like, I'm one of those people that was raised in that monotheistic God and Jesus thing, and then spent most of my adult life trying to recover from it. And because I was like, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, I can't relate to 2/3 of that. And so I like him giving value to mythology and Judaism and Hinduism and everything else alongside of Christianity, because it's a really important time to see where we have more in common than we have difference.
Well, and Edie, how the soul transcends religion, right? He accepts the
Yeah.
soul as a spiritual concept when religion is a human construct. Religion's
Yeah.
trying to religion back to Glenda. Religion is trying to explain those things that are inexplicable, like the soul, like God, like Holy Spirit. These things that we have so many names for, but they call themselves unnameable on purpose, unable to be contained. And as soon as we name something, it is contained.
Yeah.
So I think you're right there. It's a perfect time to say this is a journey inward, not necessarily to find answers, but for the journey itself.
Well, and that was part of what he talked about too, was the mysteriousness, allow for the mystery, right?
Yeah.
But he did make them similar when he talked about religion and spirituality. He kind of made them go back and forth a little bit so that they sounded like it was a similar thing. But I mean, I see them as very different things personally. But religion, as like you said, Joe, social construct, whereas spirituality is something a little bit more ethereal than that. But
and the other crossroads that was interesting was the way he dealt with the soul as an aspect of common theories in psychology.
Of what?
yeah,
Eric?
yeah.
Edie?
Common theories in psychology. Yeah.
So it was
'Cause
really
he's a psychologist too. Yeah.
it was really interesting to hear his stories, as a therapist, patiently listening to these things. Now, there's some stuff that lost me, like the whole thing with Narcissus and the fact that a narcissist does not love himself. And
That's
I
a
just
good
felt there
question
was
right
way
there.
too much information on narcissism. Way too much information. And unfortunately, both in religion and in psychology, you've got a lot of narcissists. But I thought, oh no, we have to go over this again.
Yeah. Edie, can I ask you a question? Through the eyes of the artist that you are, was there an impact for you on the section that spoke to the material possessions having soul? He spent a lot of time talking about things like rusty farm equipment setting in a field, and that just touched me so deeply.
Glenda, I really agree with you. He was talking about the soul of the Empire State Building next to those other shiny glass building, and I was like,
Yeah, absolutely.
Glenda, I'm with you. I loved that. And I missed the tractor analogy, but because I agree with you. Yeah. And there's so much reference to art there was even one reference to the successful guy that decided to be an artist and a photographer and gave up everything and went. And he was critical of that. And I'm like, well, I can be an artist now because I have a pension. My business plan is to be famous after I'm dead. So I'm just going to die knowing I'm going to be famous after I'm dead, because that's what happens with artists.
I'm very excited to hear a lot of things. We're gonna Edie, I'm gonna do an interview with Edie in 2 weeks about her art and how she came to do this and so on and so forth.
But I mean, Glenda, to your point, I'd be curious to hear what other people, because I there's so much focus on mindfulness, and so I think this care of the soul stuff predates mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like one of the other big takeaways from this book was looking at everything more mindfully, including rusty tractors in the field,
Yeah.
Because you're pausing to notice that, and you're pausing to notice that came from someone's soul.
Yeah. Well, let's yeah, because that came from somebody's soul, or that has its own soul, is what he was talking about, those things. Yeah. Kay, what did you, because you read the whole book, so I'm going to give you compliments for that. Yay.
So did I.
You did too, Cynthia? Oh, I'm impressed.
Congratulations, Cynthia.
Yeah.
Over several weeks, as soon as you announced it, I thought, oh dear, this one's going to take time.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh dear.
So
Cheryl
Kay,
did a lot this weekend, Cynthia. And she's like, I can't talk to you. I have chapters to read. I can't talk to you. She's like, I have chapters to read. I have chapters to read. So I heard the oh dear quite a few times, Cynthia. Thank you for that affirmation.
Well, I have a lot of time on my hands, so I try to use it helpfully.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
So Kay, what chapter or topic did you find most intriguing? What?
At the very beginning, when he was talking about mother and father.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Remember, I was a literature major, English major when I was in college, and so I do have a lot more familiarity with the Greek mythology. So it wasn't as, that part of it wasn't as difficult for me. So I was actually very enthused about that chapter about father and mother. And then it sort of, right after that, it was like, oh, this is going to take forever to read.
Yeah.
Because it just felt like it got heavier. And and I basically had to put myself on a schedule of how many pages I was going to read in a day in order to get done by last night. So I was reading at least 20 pages a day.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. How about you, Cynthia?
Well, it was hard to go back to it. I read a lot of books, and I try to stay just on one book at a time, though, because otherwise I get really mixed up. But it was hard to go back to it. I think just the whole discussion of spirituality constantly that he wove through it all, that was, very impressive to me. And I'm fortunate enough to travel through a lot of cultures, and, was in Tibet with the monks and Thailand and all over places. And the weaving of spirituality into everything is so true. When you travel, you see it. It's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then for him to define it through words that I could decipher after a while and understand, not immediately, but like I said, oh, that narcissism, I thought, oh, so I had to step away from it for a while, a week or so, but no, it was, you could see why it's the care of the soul. The title is really reflects what the book is, which is, I like that too. I really like that. So I'm glad I read it. There's a lot of people that I would probably not recommend it to, but there's a lot of other people that I say, here's the next step in your understanding of spirituality that might help a lot.
Yeah. Go, Janice.
I after I'd read it once, I started it over again too, and I don't know, I began to kind of simplify it a little. He got very, very deep, which was good.
Yes.
But I kept hearing kind of the same theme all the time, and that was from the very beginning, basically, we have bodies, and if we don't exercise those bodies and feed those bodies, they will perish. Okay, so they're vulnerable, and we have to continue to do something to keep them going. We have spirit, and we have soul, and I kept getting that he was separating those, but maybe some of y'all didn't. But as far as the soul is concerned, I felt like he was basically saying, if you don't nourish the soul, it kind of dies too. I mean, not dies completely,
Yeah.
but it's inoperable. It's not functioning correctly, and so basically, it's the same thing, as with a body. You have to seek, and that seeking was the important thing that you have to keep up. It's not something you can just learn until you're 18 and all, you just do whatever, and you just lay it down and you don't have to think about it anymore. I think he was really strongly saying in every part of the book that you have to keep it up. You have to keep seeking, and don't be afraid to seek something that other people might think is wrong or whatever, in a different religion or whatever. That's why he was separating what religion was as to what spirituality was. And so that was kind of what I was getting out of the whole thing. And it certainly is true in my life, that I have a need for seeking, but some people don't. I mean, they just could care less, and they just ignore that.
You have a need for what?
Seeking.
Okay,
Seeking
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
truth,
that.
seeking truth, seeking
Yes, seeking, looking.
answers, etc. So I don't know. That's pretty much the overall thing I got out of the whole
Yeah,
book.
that's a really cool way to do it, is to kind of simplify it that way. And I think some people would agree with that when they went through it. But you brought up something, or alluded to something, that I wanted to bring up to folks, is what did you all get as this takeaway here on his relationship, or between soul and spirituality? Did you get that he was talking about the same thing, or did you see them as different, or what'd you see?
I saw them as very different. I saw
Yeah.
spirituality more as almost a consciousness that intends something, whereas I saw him talking about the soul as something that intends us.
Ah,
Wow.
Yeah, something that's really a cool way to put it, is intends us, almost like a cross over or an intermediary between body and spirit. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very subconsciously so.
Yeah. And yet he talked about you having to consciously seek, right, Janice?
I didn't use the seek feeling. I used more of a sense of an awareness.
Oh, that's a
And
good
it's
word.
an identifying of when it's happening to me,
Mhm.
A noticing.
a
Yeah.
noticing.
Yeah.
As the soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To nourish the soul, or to care for the soul, that noticing or
Is to
awareness.
see it, is to acknowledge it.
Mhm.
Did anybody find any specific relationship to the CLM that we did?
That's what I was going to go for, Cheryl. Yeah, the quote that we used, or the reading that we used.
Do you remember the
Well-
quote, you guys?
No, could you tell us again?
yeah.
I think it's, Joe, do you have it right there with you, or do you want?
I was just pulling it up.
I
so
can
we need-
paraphrase it, but
Nope, go ahead. I'm trying to pull up the slide for everybody. So go ahead.
essentially, it's important to know what you aren't before you can know
Yes,
who you are,
yes.
right?
That was one of my favorite things.
It was
Yeah.
a story.
Yeah, the
No,
story
like-
that he told, remember of how he said he was introduced as, here is what Tom is not.
Yeah.
And he was introduced as something. He's not this, he's not this, he's not this. And he was like, oh my God, what, I mean, and then thought about it later, and he thought, wow, you really do have to have a knowledge of what you're not, an emptiness, so to speak, before you can actually get to know who you are, you know?
Mhm.
So
I
that-
was just reading that part when we were addressing that in CLM. And I thought that was helpful that I was reading that part at the same time.
yeah,
But I can't say enough about CLM. I will say I do miss having meeting and about it and talking each week. It was such a profound experience. So I know you're all assessing it now, but I hope next year you can maybe have even more session, whatever you'll decide, but it's a very meaningful thing.
thank
Well,
you, Cynthia,
Yeah,
appreciate that.
we're looking at, we just are meeting about that, about doing some focus groups and seeing how the experience was on that side of the camera compared to all the work we did on this side of the camera. And I'm trying really, really hard to be open to all sorts of new things, you know. CLM, the challenge for us is it's been this thing in our lives for nearly 2 decades. And it's been relatively similar, you know, how it's been delivered. As a designer, for me, it's a predictable outcome, right? If someone wants to offer this to an organization, we can almost tell them exactly what's going to happen in different markers. And with CLM being online and Cynthia, you being able to take it completely external from any other organization, or my family members being able to take it, you know,
Right.
it's really just it's almost incomprehensible what we have to take in so that we can redesign so that it can do its work.
Well, and I did invite several people, but a couple people I invited quite firmly, and they both took it.
Nice.
And I'm happy to tell you that they both have shared with me that it made an absolute huge difference to them. So that inspired me that if you have even more, or it's more online and available, I just think of the people that we could infuse this energy into.
That's exactly where we landed, Cynthia, was just the profundity of it did its work, and it truly was just a taste. Any of you that have taken it know that what you got in each session
Yes.
was a tiny bit.
And I was never able to take it, although I wanted to. It just didn't come where I was. But
Yeah.
one of the people that took it at my encouragement said, well, it was never stated what they were talking about, but it was, well, something's been going on for 7 years and it's not going to go on any longer. And I thought, uh-oh.
Isn't that great?
Maybe her life was going to collapse, but no, here's 2-3 weeks later, and she's saying what she wanted to happen has happened.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, let me get back to the book a little bit,
I'm
okay?
sorry.
Look, honey,
That's okay. It's okay. It's all
I'm
good.
gonna
That's where
take
we
us
came
to
from.
a
It came
break
from that. Yeah,
Funny.
Edie, you have something to offer? I was going to comment
Yeah.
on something that you and Glenda had said, and see what other people thought, but go ahead.
Oh, well, I was gonna circle back to what Cynthia raised about, several people raised about the importance of what we are not. And when
Yes.
I reread that, you know, because because the Air Force has really good education benefits, I've collected a lot of degrees over the years because that's my natural environment is school. I really am that person. But you know, and so when he said, well, you know, I'm a professor, but I'm not really a scholar, and I was like, wow, yeah, I have these degrees, but I'm not working in that field. And so I think the big picture is that what he's saying is don't measure your soul the same way we measure your curriculum vitae or your resume. You know,
yeah.
Right.
we
Amen.
tend to associate value
Mhm.
with those things that go on that resume, when really maybe, as far as your soul's concerned, the real value is in your deepest you know, melancholy or your deepest challenges. So I like turning that perspective on its head, that, you know, when we introduce ourselves, we're quick to introduce, you know, some great thing we did. You know, and nobody talks about being up at 2 o'clock in the morning, feeding the baby, or, you know, cleaning the bottles or doing laundry or whatever. So I'm glad that issue came up. What are we not? We got to strip away a lot of stuff before we get to what our soul is.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's good. Thank you for that.
Cheryl,
So Edie, yes, Joe?
you know, one piece that from the reading that we gave you in CLM, the quote that we kind of used was, considering who we are not, we may find the surprising revelation of who we are. And right underneath that, he says, soulful emptiness is not anxious. In fact, power pours in when we sustain the feeling of emptiness and withstand the temptations to fill it prematurely.
Mm.
You know, that is a thing. And I think right now, Cheryl, is in our lives, is helping, you know, one of our kids understand that there is a temptation to fill, to normalize, to fix, to move through, when being in that empty space is profound learning, profound opportunity, mostly uncomfortable. And yet if we as humans can not run away from that space of soulful emptiness, or those places of deep, dark fear, that there is indeed presence and learning, awesomeness in that darkness.
Right.
Sorry, and that's what I was trying to find, which is why we use that piece in the care of the soul, because you discover first what you're not, and maybe in our case, what doesn't bring you joy, because people are doing a lot of things that don't bring them joy. And the question that he poses, and then we pose in CLM, is why? If you're doing something that doesn't bring you joy, is there a life circumstance that is requiring that of you? Perfectly understandable. But did you get stuck in that life circumstance? And are you still doing things that don't bring you joy? It's just almost like a temperature check. That is not caring for the soul. And if you're not caring for the soul, you are absolutely not caring for the you, the spiritual you, the physical you. So there's my piece, honey. I'll hush and be the host.
Well, and maybe I shouldn't go back here to this point, but I was wondering with when Edie and Glenda both talked about, what he said about everything, objects, situations,
Right.
buildings, everything has a soul. Even just anything that's inanimate, and I had never thought of things like that. And so I was wondering how that impacted you all, if you started seeing other things as having a soul, or if you saw, well, that makes sense, or that's right, or whatever. What do you guys think? Even if you haven't read the book, what do you think about that? About other things that are not animate, a building, a situation, or whatever, having a soul, or share some experience you have around that.
How could they have a soul? An inanimate object, how could it have a soul?
Well, the vibe that they give off, I get a lot of soul from being surrounded by my family antiques. Someone
Your
said to me
family's
yesterday,
antique. Yeah.
in my guest bedroom, when you sleep there, you sleep in the bed that my grandmother birthed all 7 of her children in.
Well, yeah.
And I tell people that. I mean, and now, of course, I'm at a point in my life deciding what I'm going to do with that, but that's a whole nother story. But my point is, these inanimate objects take on a wonderful sense of history and connection. And my sister, who unfortunately has dementia real bad right now, she took a lot of those objects and took photographs of them and then made stories on the computer and put that all in a frame. So that, like these quilts from the Amish, which my family were very involved with the Amish. And Jane made a big story about that and took pictures. And so it gives them life that nurtures us and the spirit, and you remember how they nurtured each other with objects, and that's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, because if you're driving in the country and you come across an old homestead that maybe is no longer inhabited, but there's a big barn at the back, and there's a couple of side barn boards are falling off and so on. You have to wonder, what's the story of the barn? What year was that tree that sideboard was made from? what year did that seed germinate? That was the tree that the board came from. I mean, there's this continuum of our world that is present everywhere.
And I am very in touch with that stuff because you can ask anyone. I'm one of the most sentimental people, and I'm the person that wants to go stop and drive and go over to that barn, you know?
Yeah.
But I still see that as meaning that we give that stuff. Like a remote control doesn't have a soul to me. A paper clip.
Well, no, you're true. It's right. You're right. I understand.
And that's where I try to get to everything has a soul. What?
Maybe I can give a different example. Has anybody heard of Chaco Canyon in New Mexico? So it's this ancient site that dates to, I think, the 12th century. And it's situated, it's Native American, but over the years, they've excavated items from Central America, chocolate from South America, items from the East Coast, shells from that they know came from the East Coast, stuff from the West Coast. So even in the 12th century, the peoples were coming together at this place called Chaco Canyon, which is situated from east to west and from north to south. And the Native Americans recognized 6 cardinal directions: north, south, east, west, up and down into the earth. So the kivas, they're intentionally, you climb out of them because that is a cardinal direction to go up. So their construction for that place, which was a meeting place, an international meeting place, 800 years ago, 900 years ago, the way it lays, according to the equinoxes, the way it's built, the way it houses people, its functions, very much had a soul. And maybe part of the problem is with our quick production now, we don't see as much soul. Like we'll look at Cynthia's antiques and there's going to be some intense craftsmanship in there.
Oh yeah.
That feels like the soul, as opposed to some, somebody puffs some plastic into a mold. That doesn't feel so soulful to us. So I guess that question would be, where do we draw the line on Kelly, where do we draw the line on what items have a soul and what don't?
Well, and I think you're right, Kelly. It has, some of it has to do with it. It's always about what kind of meaning we give to things, right?
Yes.
So, but I thought that was a very interesting comment he made. It made me stop and think about, because I don't pay attention to that kind of stuff either, but I thought, wow, really? There are a lot of churches or a lot of old buildings or anything like that you walk into and you experience this soul, this, these feelings that I said, oh, that's what that is. That's soul, what he was talking about. And so that was, it gave language for it to me,
I think it's the story behind everything.
The story behind everything, Eric? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, it doesn't have to be like flesh and bone or walking around. It's the story behind the object.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also, I think it can be a deconstruction of Christianity that says, when Paul said, this is the body, it is not good. This is the soul, it is good. And so spirit was good and body wasn't good, which leads into what, Ken's whole thing around that tearing apart. Yet when God chose to become animate, when God chose to become in a body, it's just deconstructing Christianity, Kelly. What Christianity has damaged our understanding, our wider understanding of spirituality, right? Mm-hmm. And so something like the TV clicker can't have a soul, but because of your understanding of Christianity, that wouldn't have a soul. I just wonder if it's about our own definition.
And think about the person that invented that. I bet seriously, I bet
Yeah.
They infused a lot of energy into it, and even what we might call soul. In other words, they wanted something to quickly communicate, and they invented it.
Mhm.
So when Darlene and I were in Tibet, we were doing a lot of touring. Darlene is my partner who passed away 3 years ago, my partner of 40 years.
Mhm.
But we went to the different monasteries, one after another. And we were enjoying it and the chanting and all. And finally, I looked over to the guide. His name, by the way, was Karma, which was interesting. And I said to him, do you have convents here? Do you have people where women are? Oh, yes, but you don't want to go there. Oh, why wouldn't we want to go there? Because they have nothing for you to see. And that's when I realized, well, we would go to these monasteries, we would be taken through these chambers, and eventually we would be brought into one where was the tooth of a Dalai Lama from the 5th century. There were objects that they valued, they gave great value to. So I said to him, tomorrow I want to go to a convent, no matter what we have to do, whatever. And he said, oh, I can arrange it, but I don't think you want to go there. So we went there right in the heart of Lhasa. And wouldn't you know, I called her the Mother Superior, came around the corner in her robes with a shaved head, which sort of shocked me, and she had Adidas tennis shoes on. But she took us into the chambers where the women were doing the prayer wheels, putting them together, the young women. There was so much spirit in those rooms that it just blew us away. The camaraderie, the commitment. Of course, they wanted us to drink that tea that they have, which was terrible tasting, but we gave a little sip. But I guess my point was, to us, that was where spirit was. But to them, it was out in those monasteries with that tooth from the Dalai Lama of the 5th century. So I'm sure it was everywhere, but spirit in people and spirit in objects is different, but I think it can be everywhere. At least I found it to be. So,
And it's about your perception too, right? When we
Right.
change our perception a little bit and see it a little bit differently, and that's what he did for me, was he said, look at it a little differently, Cheryl, and you'll see that there's a little bit deep, there's more deepness, there's more mystery, there's more something there that is beyond just the actual object or the actual thing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. I see you've got something in your part. Hold on a second. I'm just going to check on, she says, what's the intersection between soul and aspects of personality? Because she finds herself saying the internet's cranky today, or my car is happy because she's running well, right? So there's an intersection there. When he was talking about care of the soul, and you went through this book, is it natural for you all to do things that are care of the soul, or did he give you more impetus to try to look at how do I care for the soul?
oh yes. I don't have all the solutions, but I have a lot of questions from reading his book about my direction in caring for my soul and others and helping others.
And what would be some of the ideas that you all took away that said, this would be a way? Go ahead, Janice.
Well, I like I said, I'm kind of a natural seeker, and I like to find all kinds of ideas and twists on different things that I've learned, and I've often thought that was not appropriate. That I should go the traditional route, because I was brought up that way, Southern Baptist and the whole thing. And so sometimes that I have kind of set that tradition aside, and I'm constantly seeking other answers and other information. And I think one of the things that this book did for me was validate my constant seeking, that it actually is a good thing to continue to find answers, and what actually comes to you as your truth is your truth, and may not be somebody else's truth, but it's my truth. And so I think in the future, I will feel a little more settled in what springs up to me, whether it goes along with what I was brought up to believe or not.
Right.
And one of the things that I do with that, and that was another thing I kept thinking myself, that I was just making this happen because I wanted it to be this way. I wanted to believe this way. But in reality, I just, so I was worried that I was only pulling out the things I wanted to believe. And in this, he led me to kind of think about that and think, also caring for the soul means to see things that come to you as being the thing you needed to hear or see at that time. And I kind of move in and out of that belief. And this just kind of validated that as well.
And it gives you that, I mean, because we're all individual, right? So you don't have to go after the same exact things or the same exact, we're all part of the whole point. What he was trying to make too is that the soul is very individual for each of us. And
Yes.
and we'll all come out after something specific for our soul. We each need to seek different things or be aware of different things, and at different times you'll get something different from the same situation or the same reading
Exactly.
that you're talking about or whatever, so anybody else have something that
My
they
thoughts on Janice, I want to just lift up the fact that you began with seeking and you moved to finding. And I think that
Yeah, I found a lot.
yeah, and yet his language to me it is about the seeking.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the finding. That the journey of the soul is in fact that. It's the journey. It's the seeking and the questioning. And the beautiful part, the reason we put him into CLM was because so many of us don't question the religion that was handed down to us.
Right.
Those teachings, we just accept them because we were taught to them in little, I don't know, Bible study or whatever they were as children. And then we're taught them again as adults. And, when I finally became a pastor, one of the most challenging things to me was what I had taught to people without my own critical work. I had just taken all those other teachings or those readings or those studies and passed them on without that critical. Janice, what I hear in you saying is, if I seek something, I'm really going to look at it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And
Notice, be aware of,
not be forced to find an answer with it, but notice that it is along my path. What does it gift me with? What do I notice? And so I just want to push you there a tiny bit to say, I love that seeking part without the stress of needing to find anything.
Right.
Well, and in a traditional Christian church, I almost feel like they say you have to accept the whole or none. And like you were saying, Janice, about you wanted to pick the parts that you liked and didn't like. And I felt that in the Christian church. And I also felt like I couldn't even question the stuff that didn't seem real, or didn't resonate to me,
Because the Christian church tells you to believe. So the way to belong is to believe and then profess your belief.
Right.
Unfortunately, we often, for membership as a teenager, or a 12-year-old or a person that has come upon the age of reason, whatever that means. I'm still seeking that age. But we require them to profess out loud beliefs. And they don't understand. I mean, Kelly, we're still, again, back to Janice, I'm still seeking what do I understand about those things, those concepts, those stories. And is there power? And he uses this a lot, back to the book, about myth. He says the only way the soul can actually be explained, right, is through myth. And for me, that's the whole Bible. The Bible is a story. It's many stories put together
Right.
to explain, again, things that maybe happened and maybe didn't. And Fanny Flagg's book says, another quote in CLM is, this may have happened and maybe it didn't. We just know it's true.
Well, but I was just thinking that it was so interesting that we call what the Greek mythology and the other,
Yeah.
Yeah, is it because it's mythology?
Yeah.
Well, and what you're talking about too, about belief versus experience, Janice and Kelly, is part of the things that we talk about in CLM in the first section in the rediscovering relationship with the sacred. It's, do you validate your belief or your experience? Which one, has the most, weight, for you? And are some of these beliefs that you were taught no longer serve your soul? They don't serve you anymore. It's the experience that you have, or whatever experience you've gotten from something else that would bring it, So,
but the Christian churches, I just find that interesting because it scared me when I first started thinking that stuff, because they say that's New Age thinking. That's not biblical, and I don't know. I just crossed it out of my mind for so many years that him saying, thinking of things from the point of view of the Greek mythology makes you think more about that.
Yeah.
Kicks open a door, doesn't it, Kelly? And as long as you're not shamed or going to hell because of it, you have a little more permission to think and to experience and to say, what does this mean for my life? What does this mean to my soul? Absolutely. And that's just the challenge of the Christian church, requiring to control its people like any other organization. How do we control? And the way the Christian church uses to control is fear. One of the ways is fear.
Oh, yeah.
So
I think the other thing too is that we're all, not all, many of us are of an age where we are only the first generation after the believers, if I might say that, because our parents would never have had this conversation
No.
ever in their lifetime, because they didn't realize that it was a possible conversation.
Yeah. That's a good
And
point, Glenda. Yeah.
so because we're so close to what was, we're just kind of breaking out a little bit here.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing with my son's generation, he's in kind of an abyss.
Yeah.
And my granddaughter is going to be one of the non-believers. So I think we're about 3 generations away from the believing becoming again and beginning to grow itself again, but in a way that we've never seen before.
So maybe another, I can't say the right word, Jesus, God's going to send
Well,
another
sort of
one.
a revelation, renovation, a revelation. Yeah.
I heard something once that said that God sends these, what am I trying to say? Like,
Prophets.
yes, thank you. That sends prophets every time we need one. And this religion that I was listening to said, all of them, even Jesus, they were all just a prophet. And then as soon as we changed the story so badly with our human paint on the story, that God has to send another one.
when we screw it up, wow.
Well, one of the things that he talks about is that care of the soul is not something that's in huge, big things, but it's in everyday, daily things that we do. It's little stuff, right? And I know for me, it made me stop and think, what it means for me is I just need to slow down and and pay attention to things a little bit. I have a friend that when I started thinking about people who do things soulfully, she cooks soulfully.
Oh, wonderful.
And I mean, you can feel the soul when you eat one of her meals. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And I mean, she was kind of mentoring me or coaching me through preparing some pulled pork, a pulled pork recipe. And she was like talking it through every little step and every little detail and really getting into, you know, then you do this with this, Cheryl. And, you know, and I'm like, wow, I mean, I would just fix it, you know, and she's like, you know, into the whole thing. And I'm thinking, wow, this is really amazing the way she deals with it. And she's like, not interested in dealing with anything like one of those instant pots or anything. She says, I want to be able to use a Dutch oven because I want to be able to be with the food and experience it and, you know, cook with it, you know, and feel the cooking and stuff. And I'm like, wow, that was pretty amazing to me, you know, and it just made me think I need to slow down, you know, and pay a little more attention to some of these little things instead of just do. And, you know, be so practical about the whole thing, right? So that was what I took away from the whole care of the soul, was paying attention to that for me, myself, and for also for caring for the soul of the world, you know?
It's sort of like, what part of your soul aren't you feeding? Is somebody said that at the very beginning.
Yes, yeah.
It was very simply, he says, and I had heard a friend of mine who's a preacher say something to the same effect, but he says, in the quest for the power of the soul, be good at what you're good at.
Yeah.
Your friend's good at cooking, you know, it's
Go for it.
what she was put here to be good at was to do that. I think the frustration for most of us is figuring out what we're good at. I think we probably know deep down what we're good at, but we get hit from all sides by what society says is valued or not.
Yeah, it gets mixed up in that, right?
Yeah. I think that.
Yeah, I love this at the very end of the book. And so we can, you know, go with this and you guys we can close up a little bit. We're getting kind of late, but ultimately, he says, ultimately, care of the soul results in an individual I that I never would have planned for or maybe even wanted. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting, you know? An individual I that I never would have planned for or maybe never even wanted, you know? Something deeper inside of us.
Another thing I'm finding out about this book is I've mentioned it to friends who, if you had asked me about their spirituality or whatever, I'd say, I know nothing about it. I don't, you know, that's not that kind of friend. But I'm finding out that many of the psychologists and psychiatrists, whatever, they have read this book.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, you know, with my sister with her dementia, all these different things in my life, it's been a wonderful bridge to actually talk to people that you would think didn't sort of connect or whatever you want to say to spirituality, but this book can be a bridge to connection.
I love you, Cynthia. You say that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
And you know, I want to flip that over. Dr. Aaron, you've had your own practice. You've been a life coach, an executive coach. You've worked with individuals and teams. You know, I wonder as you listen to this conversation and Cynthia's comment there, you know, isn't your profession, isn't your job to help folks, like to invite them to care for their own soul? I would just love a moment of perspective on that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm a psychologist. I had a practice for 18 years, and the third wave of behavioral therapy was really started, you know, in the 90s, and it was after the second wave of cognitive behavioral therapy was in the 50s, and that was all about your thinking and blah, blah, blah. The third wave of behavioral therapy is why I moved to Reno to study under these people who were on Time magazine cover, and they borrowed everything from Hinduism and kind of called it their own, but it was like this radical acceptance and mindfulness. And you're like, you stole that from Hinduism.
Yeah.
And so definitely I came out of the era of, we don't talk about such things, to, I was the only one that was really asking my patients the question in every assessment, do you have any spiritual or religious beliefs that help you in your life?
Yeah.
And time again, all my clients said, I've never had a psychologist ask me that. Yes. And then if they said, you know, I believe in Jesus, I would say, so do I. We can bring him into therapy with us. He's like our superpower. That was not taught. It was not
No, of course not.
reinforced. And they're now, you know, of course, in the last 20 years or so, really understanding, oh, we need to study spirituality because, oh, we're human beings and we have a spiritual side to us. So they're trying to, you know, catch up.
Catch up. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. Thank you. It seems like when you boil it all down, like you said, Cheryl, individually, this is our work, and actually vocationally and friendship wise, you know, whose work is this not? To help people find out who they aren't, what doesn't bring them joy, and who they are, what does bring them joy. And are they doing, like you said, Cheryl, you know, in our life right now, mornings are going to be spent on the back deck with mom, having a cup of coffee. And that is, for me, back to you, Glenda, that is the definition of caring for the soul.
It is.
She goes out and talks to my dad. She goes out and listens to the birds. Cheryl or I come out and have our individual time with her as a mentor, as a person who is, I think, still discovering her own soul after my father died, because he was such a big personality and, you know, he directed who she was. So she's still in discovery now at, you know, a young age of 92 of who she's becoming, yet seeking, Janice, seeking.
Can we only hope that at 92, we're doing the same thing?
I pray. Yeah, absolutely. Cheryl, I just need a minute. I don't want to close this because, as always, whether we've read the book or not, the conversation is so beautiful. I just need a couple minutes to advertise because we have three people who are presenting in the rest of the month right here in this group. I'd like to toss it to each person to share what's happening the rest of the month.
So Barb, you're next week, right?
Yeah, here, I'll let me do this, Kelly. If I was just gonna say, Cheryl, do you want to close with something before I do this, honey?
No, I kind of did close, but people jumped off of it. So I don't know. I don't know really what to close with other than, you know, I think it's a great book. I think there's a very good cross between the psychology and the stuff, but the care of the soul was about taking care of your own inner depth, really, and the mystery and caring for the world. He talked about caring for the soul of the world as well, you know, which we don't often do. Anyway, and I think what happened is it ended up being a fairly profound book, all things considered, even though it started off as being very difficult reading. So I'm glad we persisted with it. I'm real glad we were able to have this conversation. So thank you all for participating in that and
Thank you, Cheryl.
persisting through it. That was really good. And then the next one is going to be also very interesting for us to read, and very, very different book, but by Sue Monk Kidd, the Book of Longings at the end of this month. And that is a book of about a woman who speaks for women, but she was actually, and it's a fiction book, married to Jesus, and talks about some different things that are going on in that relationship. So, and she also speaks for women in their strength. So that's going to be an interesting book to read.
Well, and I think Cheryl, we started with Sue Monk Kidd.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And like August, September of last year.
Yeah.
So, congratulations to all y'all. You're doing some amazing work in the reading. And that's going to be April 27th. So that's going to be the last weekend of the month. And yet I want to back us up here. Bunch of books. The Invention of Wings. Oh my God. Remember that?
Yeah, that was a fabulous book too.
Fabulous book. But before that, so close your eyes real quickly. Don't see Edie. Okay, there. Barb, next week you are taking us to Egypt. This is like, I'm so cracked up about this. In the day my family used to go to the Methodist church, and we would get a slideshow from the missionaries, right? They would tell us all about where they've been, you know, and have these great photos. And then they always ask for money to fund the missionaries. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Travelogue. I've been seeking that word for what, Barb? Like 3 months. I couldn't find travelogue. But Barb's going to give us the coolest travelogue next week. And I can't, we've been working on this for a while. So I will tell you that seriously, it's not going to be just looking at slides. It's going to be a great, Barb, you've got such wonderful stuff in store for folks. So to you, my friend, I want to share about next week.
Well, thank you. There's incredible stories, both of me attempting to navigate my way in Egypt, and stories about the ancients, and the story behind the construction of the pyramid, or some of the tombs. We'll talk mostly next week about the pyramids. I actually had a chance to climb up to the King's Chamber inside the Great Pyramid. I've got pictures of that. So we'll see that. We'll see other tombs from some of the pharaohs. There are stories that are a little bit like, what's the Jacqueline Suzanne novel with all of the infighting and backstabbing and all.
Oh, yeah.
It's a little bit like a Jacqueline Suzanne novel with everything that went on with pharaohs and their harems and their courts, and there's lots of amazing and incredible stories about that. And we'll learn a little bit about the Egyptian beliefs around life and the afterlife, and we'll hear a little bit about that as well, and some just really incredible stories and pictures and opportunities. So it should be fun and a lot lighter than some of the heavy topics of March. And so far in April, we're going to lighten it up, and figured people would be a little bit, getting itchy travel feet, wanting to go someplace and see someplace fun. So we thought we would do this next week.
Thank you, Barb. We did Aaron and I took some classes earlier this year, and there were people that used to be tour guides in these great countries, and they were just putting pictures together, and they were doing online tours of these, because we knew when would we travel again was the question, right? But they built businesses around this. So we do ours. And Barb, you said a tour of Egypt that you looked up was like $500 and some dollars, and we're doing ours.
Yeah, no, I was on Facebook last week, I think it was. And there's this organization that's advertising on Facebook now called Road Scholar, ROAD Scholar. And they're selling online, multi-day online trips, and they were going to Egypt. So, if you come next week, I can save you. They're charging $500. I can save you $500.
Well, or you can obviously pay through our website the $500 if you feel it was worthy. So we're not going to push it. But come on, think about it. And then the next week is, again, Sanctuary Online. We're always trying to look at some themes, and we've been talking about this concept of meet the artist for months and months and months. And we have many different kinds of artists laid out for you to meet over the next year. And Edie, we're more than excited that you are our first Meet the Artist. You're such a sanctuary. You love us, we love you. You'll just see Edie pull up, or the kids pull up, and they're just need to hug some goats. Just don't mind us. We're just going to the goat pen, or we've got a blanket to put by the pool, or you're going to be out and look across the pond. Just need to breathe. And you come to Sanctuary, the property, and you remind us the blessing that we live on, that sometimes we take for granted because we're there 24/7. So you're a great, just a great friend of ours, and a great, we're just excited that this is you. So Cheryl and you are going to have
I just wanted to say that, Edie is definitely a professor, a scholar. She has been in the Air Force. She spent 25 years in the military. She has a PhD. She's done a lot of these kinds of things. And you would say, oh my God, and now you're working with metal. You're a metal artist. How did that happen? And she's a very, very accomplished metal artist, even in just a few years. You've only been doing this since 2017 or something, right, Edie?
Yeah.
And so if you go out onto her website, like, this is just one of her many sculptures, and she is commissioned to do sculptures now. She does a lot of really fabulous jewelry. And I just am really excited to learn from her about how she does that, what brought her into this, and to share with you and have her share her story and a lot of her sculptures and some of the things that she works with. And you don't work with just metal, you've got some other things now too. What the latest one was buffalo horns, right?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I guess I guess I have a hard time concentrating. Like Janice, I'm always speaking, although Janice, you got the benefit of having the last name Pilgrim, which is a seeker. So I guess that's what so yeah, so that piece that's there, it's called The Hearts of Its Women. So it's a themed piece, and it was created for Texas' very first Women Veterans Day. But it's gonna be hard to wrap my arms around verbalizing where the stuff comes from, but any material that interests me. So this ring is out of antler, and a guy that sells buffalo stuff saw that, and he said, "Can you do it out of horn?" And I said, "I can try." And it turns out it's real pretty. And I know how to set stones, so I made a ring and set a sapphire in it, just to try it. But every time in the studio or the shop is a new learning experience, and it might involve it all involves red hot metal and torches, so it involves burns too, but that's part of the fun. And hammers, lots of noise. But
we're looking forward to that, Edie, and having you share some of that with us.
I appreciate the invitation. Thank you for that. And I'll see if I can't. I've had some friends wanting this kind of thing. I'll see if I can't Shanghai some more viewers onto Sanctuary Online.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks, Edie.
Awesome.
We're looking forward to that. That's in 2 weeks. And then, like I said, all these books, and once again, Sumont Kid, the Book of Longings. So April is a little bit of a lighter month, and yet come seeking, community, conversation, friendship. And as always, we say thank you for being here with us. We are blessed by you. We're honored by you. We don't take you spending some time with us each week for granted. Love you very much. And sleep well, stay clean, wash your hands.
Thank you.
Night, night.
Thanks, everybody.
Good
Thank you
night.
all.
Thanks.
Good.
Good talk.